Okay, guys, this is going to be my review of Martin Scorsese's The Iron Man, or The Irishman. The Irishman. I really liked it. I think, going into this, I was gonna compare it to The Godfather because I knew it was like a mobster film, and they both starred, Al Pacino and whatnot. And so going into this, I really thought that it'd be similar, but it's actually very different. While obviously, yes, I prefer The Godfather over this film, it was still a very good film. I think the story was so intriguing. I think of exploring this character's dynamic with these different, groups of gangs throughout history and how they intertwine history throughout the film and explore different characters with great performances, great characters. And again, like going through history, you really do get to fall in love with the characters based on the writing of the characters and the performance and the different jobs Frank Sheeran has to go through. This film is 3.5 hours long, but I feel like you could have definitely shrinked it down a lot because there's like a lot of unnecessary scenes that they just kept in. There really was a lot of unnecessary scenes. When they wanted to go pick up Jimmy Hoffa in the car ride, they were talking about like this fish and how he had fish in the car. That was completely irrelevant to the story. And there's so many scenes that they just make like a few seconds too long. Like there'll be like a shot of the car going through, but instead of it being like 2 seconds of just this car driving, it'll be like 5 seconds. And like there's a shot of like, I remember this really clearly, like when Frank goes on the plane, they like do a close up of him, but then it's like for 10 seconds, and it's these little nuggets that make this film so long. And I think, but at the same time, what I like about the line, and the problem is they dedicate a lot of time to unnecessary scenes, but I feel like they glance over stuff that I feel like would be important. Like I feel like they glance over Kennedy's assassination. I feel like they glance over Jimmy going to prison, as far as the impact of, and then they glance over Russ's death, and they glance over like Jimmy's death. What I like about Jimmy's death is how shocking it was. It was like, I thought going into the scene, like, okay, how funny would it be if Frank was sent there to kill him, and then he does, and you're like, oh wow. And so that's what happened. And I did like about the Jimmy stuff about how it affected Peggy. I think that was a kind of interesting thing, and I think part of having this set in multiple decades, I think the good that can come out of that is that you really do learn so much about this group of characters: Russ, Jimmy, and Frank, Peggy, his wife, the different kids that they have, the group of family members, and the union, and kind of growing along with these different characters. And I'm surprised how many different unique missions that he went on. I think I love the ingenuity or the cleverness with the different sequences. Whether I love that, like, okay, we're gonna do a run, we're gonna shoot them, then we're gonna throw the gun in the lake, and then we're gonna blow up the cars. And I think but at the same time, I don't know what the story is really about, because there's like the first hour is just showing Frank's early days as in the mob and in the gang and running missions. Then the last 2 hours, I'd say, is about Frank helping Jimmy, but then they kill Jimmy and end that kind of plot line. And then he could just, they end up finding all the stuff he did, excluding him killing Jimmy. They arrest him, they arrest Russ, they arrest, his whole group. Then they have like this whole montage sequence, I'd call it. Another thing is that there's a lot of montage sequences in this film. I feel like it's told in a Watchmen type way of non-linearly, but I feel like Watchmen did it a lot better, because I feel like in this film, you didn't know the relevance of jumping back and forth. I didn't get the relevance. At the beginning I did, where they reminisced on the the place where they first met, the gas station where they first met. But then it became weird because they would go from like, because like sometimes I would not know what time period they are, because it would be like one scene they're at this location, and then next scene they're in the next location. But yeah, I definitely think there is definitely some scenes that I don't think would have been good bonus scenes. And by the way, none of these scenes are bad. The fish scene, where they're talking about the fact that they had dead fish in the car, was a good, funny little scene. It's just that you wonder why it's 3 hours long. There's just some unnecessary scenes to the overall story. So what I'd contend to be the story is just simply showing Frank's life as a mob boss, or part of the mafia, or part of the union, and just showing how early life he was just a steak meat driver. Then this happened, and the ending was weird, where they're just like talking about how he's gonna die soon, and then they just end with a wide shot of him. So, but again, there's a lot to love. I'm just saying tonight. I think what to love is the great performances, the great characters, how this kind of story intertwines with history, the great sequences, whether it be like the prison fight or the courtroom scene, where they're talking about when there's a gun, you go attack. When there's a knife, you go. Or no, wait. I think it was like when there's a knife. When it's a gun, you go. When it's a gun, you go for it. When it's a knife, you go back, and or that stuff. And again, great performances by De Niro, Pacino, Pesci. I mean, there's a lot to love, but again, there's that stuff that hinder it, that I feel like they glance over. A lot of big stuff. Like Russ's death literally happens over a voiceover of Frank. But yet, we have sequences that I feel like the car, I'll go back to the car sequence. Yet we have sequences in the car where they're talking about dead fish that you're waiting during that whole dead fish stuff to have some sort of relevance, but it doesn't. And yet they still feel like there's constantly a montage sequence waiting to happen. But yet, I really did like this film. I think it is a great story. I think you really care for the characters, because it's really a character film. Like, there's no real story the characters and the story is about Frank, and then that's really what it comes down to, and Frank's involvement with Jimmy Hoffa. But again, it comes down to Frank. It's called The Irishman, referring to Frank Sheeran. But the character's great. There's a huge all-star lineup of a cast. There's some great memorable moments. What do you talk about? And great stuff that gets called back. The stuff about Jimmy doesn't like when you're late, and then the guy he was meeting with was late. Then they have a whole fight there. The stuff where Frank was gonna blow up a laundry factory turns out to be owned by another person he works for, and there was just so much standout moments, where it's like, okay, maybe it could be 3 hours long, but I don't care, in the long run. It's still a fun film. Like, these scenes are not bad. It just feels like The Irishman extended cut, but it's really good. It really is good. I think there's so many characters that, because you see them through decades and decades, you care for. And I really thought the stuff with Jimmy. I think Jimmy was probably my favorite character, though. He's funny. He's smart. He's commanding. I love the stuff with him in prison. He's sarcastic, and many times. And I really, my favorite part of the film is the stuff with what's it called? What would I say? It's called. My favorite stuff is towards the middle, when he really worked with Jimmy and Russ, and when those three were really a big team, and worked together. I think that was really where this film was at its strongest point, was when they were all together working with each other. Was what I'd say would be like part of the real strong parts of this film. But I think other strong parts were the beginning, when you just see him as an early person in crime, and the different organizations, and jumping from different mission to mission. But it's still a really good film. I really did love it. Stay tuned for more videos coming at you.